time goes on, it costs more and more and more to get smaller and smaller gas increases. Here's a perfect example behind me. It gets about 23 miles a gallon in a city and 31 miles a gallon on a highway. Being a 1994, it's got a lot older technology. It does have an overhead cam engine, but it has normal fuel injectors, not GDI. It has no turbochargers, and it's got a pretty simple 4-speed automatic transmission. Now let's see what happens with this Toyota Matrix. That is 13 years after the 2007. As you can see, it's more complex. It has variable valve timing. It doesn't have a distributor. It's got computer-controlled ignition coils. It's a much more sophisticated vehicle. It has a mass airflow sensor, where the old Celica just had a map sensor. These are more accurate. And this thing gets about 30 miles a gallon in a city and 36 on a highway. So it gets 7 miles a gallon better gas mileage in town. They both have 1.8 liter engines. They both have automatic transmissions. So in those years, there was a reasonable amount of gas mileage increasing. But you're gonna find the more sophisticated the cars become, the harder it is to get better gas mileage by using new technology. Take a 2019 Toyota Corolla with a 1.8 liter engine, rated at a whopping 1 mile a gallon better than the 2007 Matrix in the city, 1 mile a gallon better at the highway. And those 12 years from 2007 to 2019, hardly anything got that much better. So squeezing better gas mileage out of the later model cars is getting harder and harder and costs more and more money. Plus, when you take in consideration the gigantic high level of technology, more than a double-edged sword. Yes, it costs tons more money to make, and consequently, it costs tons more money to fix when the things do break down. The newer cars breaking earlier than the old ones did. You get gasoline direct injection, 1,000-something PSI pressure, turbocharging, ramming air into the engine, strains the engine more, smaller engines. Yeah, they get better gas mileage, but they have to rev higher to go faster, so they wear out faster. Basically, you're paying more and more money for less and less increases in gas mileage for cars that aren't going to last as long and wear out faster, and in the in-between, cost a lot more money to repair. Basically, you have lawyers, politicians making laws about things they really don't understand themselves. As I said, these arguments could go on ad infinitum, just go on forever, because there's arguments on both sides. As I say, we live in the real world. We have to deal with the consequences of this legislation. Understand that gas mileage can only go so far, and then you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars for tiny little incremental increases. It doesn't go with the flow of our society. People are popular SUVs. They love SUVs. They're all over the place. Well, SUVs get worse gas mileage. They're big, they're heavy, they're not aerodynamic. Same thing with all-wheel drive. In internal combustion engines, of course, it's less efficient. You get worse gas mileage. Now, strangely enough, in electric cars, it's kind of the opposite. If you have motors on all four wheels, they're actually more efficient and they use less electricity. It's a completely different setup there. But with gasoline or diesel powered engines, internal combustion engines, if you go from 2 to 4-wheel drive, you lose quite a bit of efficiency there and you're going to get worse gas mileage. But people say, oh, I got to have it, I live in the snow, or oh, I like the control and that. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have big giant family vehicles that everybody fits in and get great gas mileage in a vehicle that's going to last a long time. A perfect example of that is the Chevy pickup truck. They decided the other year to put a 4-cylinder engine in it. Of course, the gas mileage ratings are higher. But a big truck with a small 4-cylinder engine, guess what? It's not going to hold up over time. The hilarious thing is, these ratings are all done on machines and stuff, not in the real world. You take that 4-cylinder pickup truck and you load it up and try pulling stuff. Gas mileage is going to go right down the toilet. That's an empty vehicle on a dynamometer. It has nothing to do with what the vehicle's actually used for in the real world. In the real world, you have to understand physics. Yeah, physics. You might think, what does that do with cars? Well, it has a lot to do with cars. You're not going to be able to break the laws of physics. You make a big, heavy vehicle, it's never going to get fantastic gas mileage. You make a little, tiny vehicle, it's always going to ride kind of crappy compared to a big one, because the smaller the wheelbase, the more bumpy it's going to be. That's just how things are. You want a really fast car, if you drive it really fast, you're going to get crappy gas mileage. much. I can drive a car and get 28 miles a gallon on the highway with a reasonable sized car like a Crown Vic. I can also drive that same car like a maniac and get 8 miles a gallon. It's going to use more energy to get it going. And the legislators can make all the laws in the world they want. But if these laws don't follow the laws of physics, guess what? They're just going to be a joke. People want to drive around in big giant SUVs. They're going to get bad gas mileage. It doesn't matter. They're going to be more inefficient. Even if they make electric ones, if you had a smaller car that was electric, it's going to use a lot less power. You want a car that gets good gas mileage? Get a smaller one. That's just how it goes, you know? Be fooled by this technology of, oh, I'll get a 4-cylinder engine in my big truck. Gasoline direct injection. Because guess what? That baby's gonna fall apart before its time. If people want to change the whole base of transportation, that's another story entirely. But don't attempt to nitpick the internal combustion engine to death. Crazy rules by people who don't even understand what's going on. Electronic emergency brake systems, because if you don't know it, modern cars don't have a pull-up emergency brake or a step-on emergency brake. They have an electronic one, and to turn it on, you flip the switch, that turns it on. Then when you turn it off, what you do is you put it in drive. This is an electronic transmission. Then you push this forward, the light goes off, and it's now turned off. Oh, please bring back the simpler days like my Celica. Here's the emergency brake. Real simple. On, off. And there's a cable that goes to the back. Now, why oh why have they replaced a simple cable system that can last forever with electronic gizmo? Well, you know why? Because they can. And they can charge you a ton of money to fix it when the stupid things break. Because instead of having a simple cable assembly that pulls them, they now use electric switch, goes through a computer module. In this case, the computer module costs $697, and they do go bad because, of course, Fiat, Italian, Chrysler design, which are notorious for having electrical problems anyway. Then they eventually go to 2 electric motors on the rear wheels that clamp them down. I'll pull this wheel off and show you. And when we come down here we can see there's the electric cable. And there's a little motor that squeezes the brakes for the emergency. And then it's supposed to release them. And as you can see, it's plastic. There's one on this side and one on the other side. And they're about 115 bucks a piece when they go bad. And yes, they do go bad, being plastic, electronic stuff that are soaked in water while you drive down the road all the time. Plus it makes it a bigger pain in the butt when you change the brake pads because they're spiral. You gotta have a special tool to squeeze them and turn them at the same time. I'll show you right now. First, you unbolt the caliper. Out comes the bolt. As you can see, the tool fits in here. Right in here. So now, when you turn this, it also turns the caliper, so it goes in. You can't squeeze it in or you'll break the stupid thing. You have to have this tool that both turns and pushes in at the same time. And once you're done turning, you can see it's pushed the piston in, so now it can slide over the brake pads. Then you just turn this by hand to get it loose, and it comes out of the hull. Take the rest of the tool off. You can see it's stuck in there now. Now you can see it's got the 3 little holes where the 3 lines come. Here's the tool. See, it's got the 3 little pieces that fit in. Without that, you'll destroy the motor and everything, and it'll cost you a fortune. So you gotta have the tool. And now that we put new pads in, then with the new brake pads on, you slide the caliper on, get the bolt, and bolt it back in place. Now get it super tight. And you'll notice I have locking pliers here. That's because these are so cheaply made. The little nut, you can see the one on the top here, it spins free if you try to put it tight. So you got to tighten it with this. Then when you pull on this, it stays in place and locks. At least that's when you're done. Off it goes. Here we go. The emergency brake is off. Spins. Now let's put it on. Hear it make a noise. And as you can see now, I can't turn it. It's locked on. Now we'll release it to make sure it releases. And now it's released. Now as you can see, these electronic parking brakes, they made a very simple cable system turn into a complex monstrosity. $670 for the module, 112 bucks a piece for the motors. Then there's wiring in between and the switch. There's a lot of expensive crap that can go wrong. To me, this is just engineers playing around so they can control things with electronics instead of physical. It's going to cost you more in the long run There's no arguing that. Now, being a sealed electronic system, there's no maintenance involved. I mean, you want to hope they have the sealed for water good, because it's going to go through water in the back of the car, driving through mud and snow and whatever. It's going to get all over here, so you better hope that they sealed these things really well when they built them. Now, other than staying away from deep water or salt water in the ocean that can corrode all the stuff, there's no maintenance on these things because they're 100% electronic. But being electronic, hey, everybody knows electronic stuff breaks eventually. And especially something like that, it's got to be a pretty strong electric motor in order to hold the thing in place. So, you know, at some point in time, these things are going to burn out, and burn out they do. So now you know how electronic emergency brake systems work and why they might not be such a hot deal. Because after all, if you got an emergency brake that you step on or that you pull, if you got an emergency situation to stop, you can control it somewhat. With this thing, it's electronic. Your ability to control the range of how it brakes isn't all that great. Now, for parking, yeah, you're sitting, you're parking, it's there. But for an actual emergency, you can give me the old hand ones or the foot ones like in my wife's Lexus, and a lot of American cars have the foot ones. You get a lot better control in an emergency situation than some stupid little button that you pull and hope that it does its job. So if you ask me in this case, technology has taken a giant leap backwards. Give me the old cable or the old step-on emergency brake where you have a better control in an emergency situation than flipping some stupid little switch and praying that the motor does its thing fast enough and at an even enough degree that it stops straight. Now, I'll show you how the EVAP system works. We'll open the hood. To keep gasoline vapors from polluting the atmosphere and evaporating like it did when I was young, they now have EVAP systems. Big old hose goes through the system, comes up through here, and then it will burn the gases at sometimes. Since gasoline vapor is hydrocarbon, it can be burned. It'll burn through the engine. Or if you're just refueling your tank or it's just sitting there in the hot sun, the vapors go through the system, through the EVAP canister that has charcoal and stuff. That filters out the hydrocarbons, and then pure air, or at least what they call pure air, comes out of the vent, and it doesn't pollute the atmosphere because the hydrocarbons is gone. Now when you get this P0446 code, that means there's something wrong with the venting system. Well, you really want to start with that code, yes, at the EVAP canister itself. Now in old cars like my Celica, they're easy to get to. You just open the hood. In this case, there it is, right here. Here it is. But modern cars, not so simple. Now some cars you even got to drop the gas tank to get to the EVAP canister. Horrible design. In the case of this Matrix, we just have to take the left rear tire off. It's a heck of a lot easier than dropping the whole gas tank. Now when we get under here, we can see, there it is, not hard to get to. Now this here is the filter for the system. This goes back to the front of the car, and this comes off of the actual canister, which is under further. Now since we're crawling under here, we get a big mat and a big steel jack stand so it doesn't fall on our head. Now when we go under here, we can see the whole setup, the giant EVAP canister. And there's a problem here. What often happens is the vents can get clogged up with crud. Now in this case, all the hoses are on, there's nothing clogged up, so we're going to follow the vent the whole way to the front of the car. Because Toyota has a better vent system than a lot of others. They'll have actual vents down there. Spiders can get in there because they're attracted to gasoline vapors for some unknown reason. Does something to their sensory inputs. But Toyota vents in the front, so we're going to take the stop off. Get it out of the way. We follow the vent system through. We can see the stupid hose came off. A lot of times when people are working, they'll knock these goofy little hoses. You can see this part's ripped. That's just insulation. What you want to do is peel back the insulation, squeeze the clamp. The problem is that rubs on it. That's what made it go bad. So we'll hold that back, then squeeze this on. Now it's nice and tight. And this thing, you can see rubbing on it, that caused the problem. I got this on a little tighter. This should have been made a little bit longer, but at least it hasn't worn a hole in it yet. Now these EVAP systems are continually checking themselves as you drive, and when they find a leak, they trip a code that there's a problem in the system. Thank goodness it wasn't a broken EVAP canister, because on these babies, that big old thing is $375. They're not giving it away. But you can see with Toyota, it's a better design. It's sealed in the back so crud doesn't get in them. You have some American cars, all the crud from the tires gets there and then it jams into the vents and plugs them up, or worse, gets on electronics that isn't sealed that well, then the electronics short out. These Toyota systems are much more bulletproof, as you can see. The only problem with this is the hose that come off. I see that all the time on these. Sometimes it's back here where the hose comes off. Somebody takes the air filter off, then the hoses come disconnected. So if you're ever working on one, check all the hoses, and even better, so everything's working fine before you work on it. Get your camera, take a picture of everything. And then, if something goes wrong, look at your picture and compare it to what the car looks like now. You or someone else knocked off a hose somewhere. That's what normally happens to Toyotas. The systems themselves don't usually break, but through human error, hoses get knocked off. Or if they're really old, like my 94 Celica, the rubber hoses just flat rot. Find them and see which ones are rotten and have fallen off, or sometimes they completely collapse. Because realize you have gasoline vapor going through these rubber hoses, and eventually that will decompose them. And when you do replace them with special hoses that are made to take gasoline vapors, not any kind of a radiator hose or a naked vacuum hose that just has air suction. These things have gasoline vapors, and they have to have special hoses or they will come apart. And of course, if you're fixing it yourself, then you want to reset it. You just push erase code, yes, then it erases the codes, and you can take it for a ride. That's the problem, the code won't come back. So realize, even though these EVAP systems are controlled by computers, often it's simple mechanical things that go wrong. Either crud gets in the vent and plugs it up, if you got a low down one, or in this case, Toyotas, hoses accidentally get pulled off. With the Toyotas, it's not common that anything goes wrong with them in the electronics. Now, let's say you're working on a Chevy. Well, the EVAP canister vent valves go bad a lot in those, and even more so on the Chrysler products. They're just cheaply made, and the EVAP canister have electronic vent valves, and they just break, and then you got to replace the vent valve. And unfortunately, in many of the cases, you got to buy the entire EVAP canister assembly because it only comes as one piece, so they rip you off when it does break. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.